Good morning,
Good
everyone.
morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the MAESTRANO Group PLC investor presentation for the 12 months ended 30th of June 2021. Throughout this presentation, investors will be in listen-only mode. Questions are encouraged and can be submitted any time via the Q&A tab situated on the right-hand corner of your screen. Simply type in your question and press send. The company may not be in a position to answer every question it receives during the meeting itself. However, the company will review all questions submitted today and publish responses where it's appropriate to do so. These will be available via Investor Meet Company dashboard, and you'll be notified once they're ready for your review. I'd also like to remind you this presentation is being recorded. Before we begin, we'd like to submit the following poll. I'd now like to hand you over to Ian Buddery, Chairman, and Nick Smith, CEO of MAESTRANO Group PLC. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our first Investor Meet Company presentation. Our fiscal year ending in June 2021 marked an important transition from the original MAESTRANO banking-focused business to the new rail industry business. The board is delighted with the results being achieved by Nick and his team. I'll now hand to Nick to run through the results from last year. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. Before I do just dive into the presentation, I wanted to give it a recap. And to do that, I thought we'd just start with a quick video that we've got prepared, which is a customer video, but should just go a little bit to explain what it is that the platform does.
Cordell uses LiDAR and AI to automate rail inspections. This is the Cordell Wave. It's a rugged LiDAR scanner specifically designed for railroads. It's a set-and-forget device, so train crews don't even need to touch it. It can be mounted on rail inspection vehicles, high rails, and revenue trains. Cordell's cloud-based AI engine has been trained on hundreds of thousands of rail miles to accurately categorize and interpret scan data. Cordell uses LiDAR point clouds because they allow 3D calculations that video just can't do. This means you can visually travel down a track and rotate and check measurements automatically on screen with high accuracy. But the real benefit comes from identifying items of interest, and Cordell's AI helps with that too, so engineers can easily generate work tickets for specific responsibility types, like for ballast crews, or high-wide teams, or vegetation teams. With Cordell automated inspections, track closures for inspection periods can be significantly reduced, sometimes by as much as 90%. Visit Cordell.ai for more.
Told you it was short. So firstly, what I wanted to do is just recap what the MAESTRANO Cordell platform actually does. Firstly, we design and assemble low-cost LiDAR, camera, and positioning systems. We install these on in-service trains. So these are the vehicles that are already passing through the network on a daily basis. We then take that data and we unify all of that remote inspection data into a scalable cloud-based data lake. We then build and deploy fully automated AI-powered analysis applications that enable railways to inspect their networks from a computer screen. This process is almost fully automated, which is a major safety benefit and cost savings to customers. It allows inspections to happen more often with higher accuracy and lower costs compared to manual inspection methods. And automation also means that our margins increase as we increase our revenues. Our focus is on deploying our LiDAR and AI as a service to the world's railway market. It's key to understand that rail is the same in every market around the world, whether it's freight, transit, light rail, or metro, or whether it's in Japan, the US, or Brazil. Meaning we can deploy the same hardware and software systems with only minor configuration changes for each customer and each market. And with over 850,000 miles of available railways around the world, there's vast growth potential. Over the past 12 months, we've processed over 65,000 data miles across 4 continents, including Australia, the US, Japan, and the UK. In Australia, we completed 4 captures of the entire freight network. Traditionally, networks would be lucky if they completed even just 1 scan every 5 years. But by drastically reducing the cost per mile, we're enabling railway markets to increase the frequency of their scans. And this is the major innovation benefit to the rail market. The Cordell platform offers a compelling business model with increasing revenue potential from each customer as we release new AI-driven applications. And once we've captured data, which has the highest cost, the scope for AI-driven applications to provide value is virtually limitless. With a very low direct cost to deliver each new application, we increase gross margins per customer per mile. With this increasing value, customers realize the benefits, especially in reducing their labor costs, increasing safety, and reducing their own carbon footprint. This leads to a very sticky customer base with long-term upsell and cross-sell potentials. Over the past 5 years, we've continued to invest in the scalability of the platform to achieve high gross margins at scale. And by leveraging our research and development and manufacturing capability, we deliver quality hardware systems that tightly integrate with our automated software pipelines. We are an unusual company in the global AI software industry in that we've actually built and own the entire artificial intelligence platform. We have no external software and hardware dependencies. Our continuing focus on AI applications as a service and the increasing rollout of our sensors on trains around the world is succeeding against traditional service models and providers. We're not just winning contracts, we're creating a new way of working for our customers and our partners. In January this year, we released the Cordell Cloud web-based software platform, which you can think of just like Google Street View for rail, except it's updated every week with fresh data. Now with over 365 paying users, we're growing the user base by 15% per month. Only last week, we had over 170 active users at one time and multiple hardware systems live on trains capturing data in Denver, Miami, London, and Melbourne. Customers and partner wins in the US were with Union Pacific and Holland, and in the UK with Network Rail and HS1. These opportunities are really just the beginning. With an accelerating pipeline of contracts and partners, we're very pleased with our progress. As we continue to work on the engineering and safety approval processes in our relevant market, it's worth noting the approvals that we've received from Network Rail and Network Rail High Speed. These have global standing in the rail industry and validate the integrity of the hardware-software combination. And it's not just the Cordell platform that's been growing. Nextcore makes the sensors carried by both drones and trains, meaning that our research and development investment is amortized to both operations. And Nextcore has a growing list of global distribution partners and is continuously evolving its products and technology. Airsight, which is our original services business, also continues to grow with recent high-profile contract wins in Australia and an accelerating sales pipeline. Airsight provides the business with the human skills and customer projects to test and validate new projects, products, and services as we develop them. The FY21 results demonstrates the core logic of our business plan. 94% revenue growth with 50% cost growth. The increase in costs were primarily people as we expanded our software engineering teams and added rail industry experts in the USA and the UK. Increasing margins is a focus across the business. Our sales model is based on reseller partners and our product margin model on increasing automation. Our FY22 strategy is built around partners, evident with the recent Holland announcement in the US and an exciting pipeline of new partners around the world. In FY22, we will deliver additional AI services, we'll onboard new partners and open up new markets, whilst we accelerate revenue growth in our existing markets. We will continue to invest in our products and teams to ensure customer success and support the growing international sales pipeline. Feedback from customers and partners validates our platform as a compelling global offering. This gives us the confidence in continuing our growth well into the future. I'm now going to hand it back to Ian just to conclude our presentation.
Thanks, Nick. FY21 laid the foundation for the group's new direction. It's now an appropriate time to align our name with our technology and target industries. Therefore, at our annual general meeting on 18th of November, we are seeking shareholder approval to change our name to Cordell Group PLC. The new ticker will be CRDL. Cordell is a compaction of corridor delta, an engineering expression in the rail and road industries, meaning the precise measurement of changes in road and rail corridors. Thank you for your attention, and we now invite questions from the participants. Thank you.
Ian, Nick, thank you very much indeed for your presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, please continue to submit your questions using the Q&A tab situated on the right-hand corner of your screen. But just while the team take a few moments to review those questions come in already, I'd like to remind you that a recording of the presentation, along with a copy of the slides and the Q&A, can be accessed via your investor dashboard on the Investor Meet Company platform. I'd also like to remind you that your feedback is important to the company, and even immediately after the presentation is concluded, you'll have the opportunity to provide that. Ian, Nick, before we go into any live Q&A, we had a number of pre-submitted questions. If I may, the first question reads, of the 140,000 miles of track in the USA, how much do you think Cordell will be servicing in 3 years' time? Can you give a sense of how much of the total North American market Cordell will be touching in 3 to 5 years?
Brilliant. So I'll kick the ball off with that one. Firstly, there's actually a very big difference between freight miles and transit miles. So freight networks makes up about 95% of the US railway market. And the remaining 5 to 10% is made up of transit. Now, the big difference there is what we refer to in the business model part of our presentation, which is our frequency multiplier, which is higher value networks carry out more, or have higher requirements to carry out more scans of their network due to the higher frequency of passenger trains and freight trains. But from a mileage perspective, it's possible, I guess, to have contracts with most of the class ones, which make up that 95% of the 140,000 miles. I guess knowing full well, though, regardless of how beneficial the services are, not everyone is going to buy it. So we've been engaging with all of the class ones directly, and there's certainly a number of standouts, I suppose, that we're confident in contracting with in the future.
That's great. Thanks, Nick. The next question we have here is the investment in the machine learning platform a large upfront cost and then normalizes, or will it grow alongside revenue growth into the future?
Brilliant. Okay, so the AI services that we provide have quite interesting unit economics. It's fundamentally what we've built the entire revenue model on. So as we get new models and applications, it does take investment from us to build those new models. Most of that investment is actually charged to the customer. So, for example, we've just launched Ballast as a new AI service for ARTC in Australia. ARTC requested that model 6 months ago as a service, wanting to look at the overall how we can do ballast formation automation. So we built the model, we charged them to build that model. We've now deployed it in Australia for the customer. The nice thing about the AI models, though, although there is an investment to build them, the cost to actually run these applications or these models is really small, especially compared to the cost that the customer would usually take to make something. But also, once we've built that ballast model, for example, we're now deploying that in the US. because ballast is ballast, rail is rail. Virtually every market is fundamentally the same from an engineering perspective. So once we build new models or new applications, the applicability and it's where in the market that it was developed is obviously high, but also means we can drag and drop those same machine learning models into different markets. And every time we do that, the models get stronger or perform to a higher level because fundamentally they learn a little bit more about what ballast looks like. Now, ballast is just an example, I suppose, and there really is no limit to the number of different AI applications that can be run. But as we add on each brand new model, fundamentally that radically increases our gross margin for that customer.
Thanks very much indeed. The final one we've got here, Nick, is what is the difference in onboarding speed of a new operator via Holland versus a direct contract between Cordell and an operator?
Very good. So fundamentally, over the past few months, our partnership strategy has been validated, right, through Holland specifically. But and the reason for that, right, is that the onboarding time with a partnership like Holland, for example, is days and weeks, right? Whereas compared to if we're doing it or contracting with the networks, we're talking months and years. Different scalability options, and there's obviously trade-offs for that. But that is, why as we've progressed over the past few months, especially, that we're taking an even stronger approach to our partnership strategy, as it really does just enable us to go to market in new markets far quicker than we could possibly ever try to achieve ourselves.
That's fantastic, Nick. Thank you. That concludes the pre-submitted questions. If I may now, Nick, just ask you to click on that Q&A tab and just where appropriate to do so, just read out the question and give your response. That would be fantastic, please.
Yeah, sure. Ian, do you want to just take one and I'll...
Sure. So we have the question here from Andy. What visibility do we have on revenues? I think it's fair to say that more than half of our annual revenue is contracted ahead of time, and then the each year the growth part of the business is contracts that are in our sales pipeline but have yet to be secured before the year starts. We're trying to move the business to very much a recurring revenue basis, where our customers pay per mile of data captured and analysed. So as we go along, as we have more contracts with more different railroad companies, each year we will have a much larger proportion of the revenue locked in before the year begins. We have another question here from John. In other expenses, we have a line for other expenses. I think you're looking at the consolidated statement of profit and loss in the report. So those other expenses in that particular table are the expenses associated with producing our revenue. So the cost of input goods to our manufacturing, the cost of the people who directly service customer revenue. I'm happy to provide a more detailed answer if that would be helpful, but I'd need some input from our CFO to do that. But we'd be more than happy to do that after the presentation today.
Very good.
Nick, I think there's a question here from Richard, which would be good for you to take.
Okay, which is... Okay, so looking forward, so it'd be useful if you're able to give some examples of problems discovered by our system that have prevented serious accidents on rail lines, which would not have been discovered using traditional methods. Now, this is a fairly sticky question in that as a service provider in the railway industry, we try to avoid correlation specifically to our customers around the 3Ds, which is deaths, derailments, and delays. It's not a helpful conversation to have in a sales context. However, the fundamentals that we can really talk to are if we inspect a network more frequently, more often, and with higher accuracy and higher levels of performance, which we can do due to the automation, one can, I guess, deduce that we should therefore be able to detect more faults and be able to prevent, more of those types of events. I can't speak to a specific example of, avoiding something like that fundamentally, because the fact is that if you avoid it, there's nothing to, it never existed. But what we can say is that the process, especially with ARTC as an example, by using our automated system, they've been able to complete inspections that were on a 3-year backlog. Effectively meant that they hadn't carried out those inspections. The last time they did was 3 years ago. And over the past 12 months, we've effectively carried out 3 or 4 times the network scanned, which means we've seen that thing 4 times inside of that. So it's not one example. I guess there's more of an overall performance increase and improvement into the way railways inspect their networks.
So I'll take the next question. What loss are we forecasting for FY22? But that actually flows into the following question. When is our target for cash flow break even? I think that's the more important point. We are targeting cash flow break even within the next 6 months. Remembering that right at the moment, we are investing in increasing the scale of the business. We're hiring additional people so that we can process more customer data and deliver more revenue in the future. However, we do plan to be cash flow break even at the end of the year, but certainly by the end of the financial year. And the loss for FY22 will be smaller than the loss in FY21. The only thing that could possibly change all of that is if, for example, we won a particularly large contract, and there are some of these in the wind at the moment, which would involve us increasing overheads in order to prepare for the contract. But right now, our plan is to wind back the cash burn and be cash flow positive by the end of the year. Do you want to take the question from Paul?
Yes. So the question is, what scope is there for moving the technology into roads? Which is a very good question. Fundamentally, the platform was built and developed for roads first. And the reason for that is actually a technical limitation. It's much easier to put sensors on a car and drive them around our offices than it was to put our sensors on trains. So some of the first preliminary machine learning models that we ever built and sensor systems that we ever built were designed for roads to start with. So I guess fundamentally, the only limitation to our system and the software architecture, or hardware and software architecture, is fundamentally that it works in linear infrastructure, which could be anything from power lines and pipelines to roads and rail. And really, that's kind of the way that we've positioned the technology, is that there are only minor modifications if we're to roll this out in roads, for example. Now, there is different use cases and applications, so each one of those would require different machine learning models. But in reality, that's a fairly insignificant component of the expense of the platform. We've specifically, isolated the the marketing model, right, to focus on developing that industry leadership inside of the railway network. That also gives us credibility. It also builds, I guess, machine learning models specifically, and the automated applications that are really bespoke to the rail industry. And I guess lucky for us that, as I said earlier in the presentation, rail is rail. Doesn't matter where you are in the world. The engineering with railways is fundamentally the same in every market. Which is why we're focusing on that. But if you recall, we actually had a project in the Northern Territory government with our airsite business. So we still use airsite to our advantage to be able to test and deploy concepts, different service offerings before we proceed to fundamentally automating the platform on a much larger scale. So the opportunity is certainly there, specifically for roads. It's not our number one priority at the moment. Our number one priority is onboarding new customers and scaling out our solutions for Cordell and rail. But over the coming years, I dare say it would most likely be an area of the business that we decide to launch and grow, because 850,000 miles of railway is a big market. I think there's something like 6.5 million miles of roads around the world. So quite a different scale market again. With also different, competitive markets and areas, which is why we're not diluting our effort at the moment and focusing on railways.
Thanks, Nick. I'll move on to the next question from Mark. Cash burn remains high as per the FY21 results. North America did not contribute any revenue. Yes, we had a very expensive year in the United States. We have 4 people there. We always expected that we would be spending a year to 18 months to secure our first customer in North America. It is a extremely careful and conservative market, and like any engineering situation where there is millions, if not billions of dollars of risk, they're very careful and do very detailed evaluations of product. However, we've turned the corner. The first contract with Union Pacific was a really important step to be able to announce publicly that we've won what's called a Class 1 railroad in America. There are 7 Class 1 railroads. As Nick mentioned earlier, they control or own most of the freight miles in America. So winning the first one was really key. And now that we have revenue flowing from them, we have revenue flowing from our partnership with Holland, we expect the US business to very quickly be profitable. Next question from Glenn. If we need a further round of funding, will shareholders be given the opportunity to take up any offer? If that were the case, I'd very much like shareholders to have that opportunity. It's not our plan at the moment. However, we keep an open mind to this, and I think it's fair to say we are very aware of wanting to bring our shareholders with us on the journey. Next one for you, Nick.
Yeah, so this one's Paul. What is the target gross margins and what is the quantum of central costs?
National Rail, go back up one.
Oh, sorry. How much does National Rail or Network Rail spend on this sort of thing annually, and what could we do with it in broad terms? So, Network Rail in the UK is a very interesting market for us. One, because of the age of Network Rail, fundamentally every other railway around the world is built to UK standards fundamentally, and that's because most railways were modelled off the British rail system. So it's an interesting market for us in that term. It also is a very congested, busy network, which means that passenger numbers and train movements are very high across, which is only, it's a 20,000 mile network. But it does mean that the demands on the infrastructure are probably much higher than they are in larger railway areas in terms of size and geography, similar to, for example, the US, which has 140,000. But it does mean that the frequency is very high, or the requirement for inspections is very high. In terms of what they spend, there's no one number on this. What we can talk to is some of the projects, that we and the incumbents or competitors are currently working on. Some of those are for projects to scan the network, for example, which range from anywhere sort of from 100 to 1,500 pounds per mile. Those projects are in that 3,000 to 4,000 mile groupings for the different regions. And that's just kind of one example of the types of projects and the types of work that we're able to do. But I mean, Network Rail spends something like $40 million a year, 40 million pounds a year, sorry, on inspecting their assets. And so we wouldn't obviously replace that cost, but I think if we went some way and gained a percentage of that, a decent percentage of that would go a long way to explain and answer that question. It doesn't give us an exact science. It's quite a big and complicated area.
So next question from Paul: what is our target gross margin? The short answer to that is 90%. We are currently on our way there. And again, I come back to the earlier comments about our strategy, which is to get more sensors on more trains, automatically capturing data, which is then processed automatically, and our customers access the results of that processing via an internet portal, and they provision the calibrations and the analysis that they want via a user interface. So there's no human involvement on our part in any part of that cycle. It's fully automated. So as we get more sensors on more trains, more people using what we call the Google Maps for Rail, then our margin will increase, and we believe we can get it to 90%.
So there's one last question here, which is, what's the competitive situation? Which is a great question because it doesn't have a straight answer, but we've done a huge amount of work on understanding our competitive landscape and where we're positioned relative to that. Now, it's a little bit different in each market, of course, but the best way to think about it, specifically in the UK, I suppose, is our platform being completely end-to-end and inclusive of hardware and software means that we offer a complete end-to-end service. At the moment, there are no other service providers delivering a similar end-to-end service, especially with the levels of automation that we provide. Now, but that doesn't mean we don't have competitors. Contrary to that, we have lots and lots and lots of different competitors. Some of them provide, for example, specific solutions for ballast profiling, and that's all they do. Some of them might provide track inspection services at a very large scale. What we found is there are a number, in the UK, we've got two primary competitors and I guess incumbents, and we look to, and the key difference to what we do is the ultra high levels of automation that we can apply fundamentally to exactly the same services that they provide. We can do it close to 100% automated. which means that the cost of doing it is drastically lower. And therefore, which also then changes the economics of how we deliver this service to increase the frequency of scans to help the customers increase the quality of their inspections. So hopefully,
just to provide an anecdote, we had one pilot customer in America who had been charged $3 million for the LiDAR capture on a relatively short stretch of track, 50 miles or thereabouts. And when we mounted our sensor, we did it in an afternoon. So there's a couple of orders of magnitude difference in the cost and the speed with which we can capture data. And that leads me into the final question, which I'll take the technical one here, Nick, if you don't mind.
Yeah, please.
Is it necessary to have our own NextCore LiDAR units mounted? No. We can process data captured from any LiDAR unit. And we already have customers in Japan, for example, who have a backlog of recorded LiDAR data, which we are analysing for them. So, an interesting thing, there are companies, partial competitors to ourselves, who just do the LiDAR data and then hand over what's called the digital twin of the network. But once the railway gets that digital twin, they can't do anything with it until you've processed the data, until you've positioned it in terms of latitude, longitude, elevation, and so on, until you've corrected for the various errors in recording. The data has no value. So we process the data from anyone's LiDARs. The key advantage of our NextCore units is that they can record faster. So the train can be travelling at higher speed as it's recording the data. They record with higher resolution, so more points per inch, and they extract and pre-process the raw data from the LiDAR unit before it gets uploaded to the cloud and into our computer units. So in effect, we are condensing the data in real time while it's being captured, where our competitors have to store this enormous volume of data before they can do anything with it.
Yeah.
So we really do have some amazing technology in NextCore, and it's a key part of our competitive advantage, but not essential for customers who have existing LiDAR units or existing data recorded.
Ian, Nick, look, thank you so much. You've answered every single question that we've had come through from investors today, and thank you so much for the investors for submitting all those questions indeed. Of course, you'll have an opportunity to review any further questions that come in from the attendees. But just before we redirect the attendees to give you some feedback, Nick, may I just ask you for a closing snapshot, please?
Yeah, certainly. So overall, we're incredibly pleased with our business performance over the last financial year. And we're really excited with the growth potential that we've got coming into FY22 and beyond. Major focus this year will be on continuing to expand our pipeline and relationships with our partners. It's a really exciting space for us to be expanding into as we start to conquer the US, the UK, Europe, Australia, and whatever else other markets we move into.
That's fantastic. Ian, Nick, thanks again for updating investors today. Could I please ask investors not to close the session, as you'll be automatically redirected for the opportunity to provide your feedback in order that the management team can better understand your views and expectations. This will only take a few moments to complete and is greatly valued by the company. On behalf of the management team of MAESTRANO Group PLC, we'd like to thank you for attending today's presentation. That concludes today's session. Thank you very much and good morning.
Thank you.